as states may be starting to line up to take their shots at the NCAA, my question to y'all is this. Mark Emmert stepped down and was replaced by Charlie Baker late last year. Mark Emmert had a rap for not enforcing anything, just turning a blind eye on whatever happened and never actually upholding the law. Charlie Baker has come in and immediately reversed course to the point where when Michigan was under investigation, he was publicly releasing evidence that they had against the athletic department. That was something that the NCAA had never previously done. Everything was so hush hush behind closed doors. Is Charlie Baker, first of all, justified in the stance that he's taken that no, now there is a bright line. You uphold the rules. You have to play by the rules. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. But is it too little too late for the NCAA?
I think yes and yes, honestly. Like I personally I would prefer we have very openly talked about and openly discussed rules and consequences. I think that would be good for the sport. I think a lot of what people complain about with where college football is headed would be solved by just very clear guidelines and very clear consequences for breaking those guidelines. And if you're not going to enforce the rules, why even have rules in the first place? I think he's more than justified in having those rules and enforcing those. But the NCAA has just been so toothless for so long. I think you can go all the way back even to, the 1980s when every other year someone in the Southwest Conference was getting put on probation. That all culminates with SMU getting the death penalty. Ever since that happened, it seems like they've just been scared to do what they did to SMU, right? Like they saw how that affected SMU. And obviously there have been major, major penalties that have been enforced since the SMU death penalty, but nothing as drastic as even was done before the death penalty leading up to that, like scholarship limitations, bowl bans, all that. It was way different back in the 80s. Go watch the Pony Excess documentary, 30 for 30. It's a great look at that. But I think it is too little too late. I think for too long, they've just kind of let it be, we know this is happening, but it's just part of the game. Figure out how to get it done, figure out how to cheat in a different way that isn't as obvious. If it's super obvious, we're going to have to do something. And you can't, when schools have operated under that way for so long, you can't just flip the switch and expect them to all come along right off the bat.
Right. I mean, you can't treat it like it's a vacuum, right? This isn't, day one for, Charlie Baker. It's not day one for the NCAA, right? He can't just walk in and be like, all right, guys, it's time to lay down the law. Like, that's great. You got a mess to clean up, though, right? Like, I think even like make the comparison to the Pac-12, right? We talked at length about the Pac-12 last offseason about how they had failed as a conference for a long time. And then obviously you turn over the guy at the top. That's cool. He's maybe doing some good things, but the ship is sinking, right? The ship is already sinking. It's taken on too much water. There's nothing you can really do to save it at this point. It's going to take a miracle, right? You could also compare it to even, at the top of a country, right? If you're talking about a presidential election in America, you could be a guy who comes in and decides, I want to pick a new set of policies, but it's not like the rest of this country's history didn't happen, right? Everything has already happened up to this point that's brought you to where you are. And the same thing is true for the NCAA. They've done everything they've done up to this point. All of the member institutions have reacted, and they've gone, this way and that way and zigged and zagged to try to get around rules or get around guidelines or whatever else it is. And, up to this point, that's what's happened. If you want to try to enforce it now, cool. But just the game has been so different for so long, right? Like, are you telling me Nico's the only guy who's flown in a private jet for recruiting purposes? I don't know. I'm not going to go with you on that one. I think there's loads that have. So, when I think about this situation specifically, go ahead, enforce the rule, but go find every guy who's currently playing college football who's flown in a private jet and go and enforce it there too. Because I think what you'll have is, there's going to be like 6 schools by the end of it that are eligible to play in the postseason. So, congratulations, Eastern Michigan or whatever. You're the national champion by default at this point, right? Because nobody else is clean or something, right? So, I have no idea, where they're going to go from here. I don't know how you dig your way out of this. But again, the ship is sinking. The ship is taking on water. I don't know that there's anything you can do at this point. besides just doing some kind of a total overhaul and saying, let's hit the reset button. But I mean, realistically, that's not possible.
Well, I feel like we're headed towards the Yalta Conference a little bit here. I think if the NCAA goes away, I mean, honestly, I think you're going to have the powers that be all sit down in a room and hash out a new charter, right? I mean, like, there's nothing that ties the NCAA to these conferences. It's like our currency, like it's a social construct. Like if the
Yeah.
NCAA could go away tomorrow, and there would be a whole lot of chaos initially, there would be a whole lot of okay, now what? But the conferences would survive. The schools would figure out a way to,
We would play college football next year without the NCAA.
yeah, we would find a way
Football
to.
wouldn't have a problem. The other sports would have a major problem very
Yeah.
quickly. But yeah,
Yes, and maybe that's a discussion for another episode. That then you go into, okay, do you have one new governing body, a new commissioner? Do you have the conferences take over? I think, Trey, to your point, just yes, football, the major sports. I think basketball could survive as well, but
they'd have to
swimming and
figure out how to do it
diving.
without $1 billion from the NCAA tournament. But
Well,
they could probably figure that out.
yeah,
They just rename it and somebody else would host 64 teams. It's,
Yeah.
Exactly. So a whole lot that we just get to wait and watch. I mean, goodness, the sport never fails to deliver headlines. You saw Jeff Hafley leave Boston College today to go join the Green Bay Packers as a coordinator because of it. The state of the game is wild. It's topsy turvy. And it certainly creates a lot of headlines. And now the NCAA is back in the headlines, but for all the wrong reasons once again.
Gracious, how about